Okay, so have you ever stopped and thought about how many decisions you make every single day? Like, it's crazy, right? From like the really small stuff, should I hit snooze again? What am I going to have for breakfast? To some pretty big life choices, like, should I switch careers? Should I move? Should I buy this house?
It's a constant barrage of decisions, isn't it?
Mhm.
And honestly, sometimes I nail it, and other times I'm like, why did I do that? But the thing is, there's actually a whole field of science dedicated to understanding why we make the decisions we do, and even better, how we can get better at it.
Right. Like, it's not just random. There's a method to the madness. And that's what we're diving into today, right? Like,
Yeah.
how to make smarter choices, the kind that actually benefit us in the long run.
Exactly. And these sources you've gathered, they're like gold mines of insights into the whole decision-making process, like
Mm.
how our brains work, the common traps we fall into, and some really cool strategies to help us make better choices. It's all about cognitive science.
I love it. Okay, so buckle up, everyone, because we're about to unpack all of this. So first things first, let's talk about how our brains actually make decisions.
Okay, so one of the most fundamental concepts here is this idea of dual process theory. Have you heard of that? It's often talked about as System 1 and System 2 thinking.
I have heard of that, yeah, but like a little refresher would be great.
Sure. So think of System 1 as your brain's autopilot. It's fast, intuitive, and it happens without you even really thinking about it. Like when you're driving and you see a red light, you just automatically hit the brakes, right? You don't
Yeah.
have to like consciously think through the steps. That's System 1 at work.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like our gut feeling, our immediate reaction to things. But if we're always on autopilot, doesn't that mean we could be making some bad decisions? Especially when it comes to the more complex stuff.
You hit the nail on the head. That's where System 2 comes in.
Yeah.
This is the more deliberate, analytical part of our thinking. It kicks in when we're facing a more complex problem, like trying to figure out our finances or planning a big project at work.
So it's like slowing down and really thinking things through, weighing the options, and making a more calculated decision.
Exactly. And the key here is knowing when to switch gears, when to move from that automatic System 1 thinking to the more deliberate System 2. Like when you're facing a big decision that's really going to impact your life, that's when you want to hit pause and engage System 2.
Got it. So like before you make a big purchase, accept a job offer, or anything major like that, take a step back, breathe, and think it through.
Exactly. And another thing that the sources emphasize is challenging your initial gut reaction. Like ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What evidence do I have to support this? Am I being influenced by something else?
Right, because sometimes those gut feelings can be based on emotions or biases that we might not even be aware of.
And speaking of biases, one of the sources dives deep into this fascinating concept of heuristics.
Heuristics. What are those?
So heuristics are basically these mental shortcuts that our brains have developed over time to help us make quick decisions, like these rules of thumb we use without even realizing it. And they can be really helpful for everyday decisions, like what to wear or what to eat for lunch. But sometimes they can lead us astray.
Okay, I'm seeing where this is going. So these mental shortcuts, while super efficient, can sometimes lead us to make biased decisions.
Exactly. And there are a few specific biases that are really important to be aware of. One is confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias, that sounds familiar.
It's the tendency to look for and favor information that confirms our existing beliefs. We tend to surround ourselves with people and information that already agree with us, and we kind of filter out anything that challenges our viewpoints. It's like building an echo chamber for our own opinions.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. I've definitely caught myself doing that before. It's so easy to just consume news and opinions that already align with your own.
Right. And it can be really dangerous, especially in today's world where we're bombarded with so much information. So being aware of confirmation bias is a huge step towards making more objective decisions. And then there's this thing called the availability heuristic.
Availability heuristic. I haven't heard of that one. What is it?
So this is where we judge the likelihood of something happening based on how easily examples come to mind. Like if you've recently seen a news report about a plane crash, you might be more likely to overestimate the dangers of flying, even though statistically it's still one of the safest ways to travel.
I see. So those vivid images or stories stick in our minds and influence our perception of risk, even if they're not representative of the actual probability.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to pay more attention to those emotionally charged events, even if they're statistically rare. And finally, there's the anchoring effect. This one's really sneaky.
Anchoring effect. Okay, tell me more about this one.
So the anchoring effect happens when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, even if it's not relevant or accurate. Like, imagine you're negotiating a salary for a new job, and the employer throws out an initial offer of, say, $50,000.
Okay, got it.
Even if you know you're worth more, that initial number can become an anchor in your mind, and it can subconsciously influence how much you're willing to negotiate for.
Ah, I see. So even if it's not the right number, that first piece of information kind of sets the stage for the whole negotiation.
Precisely. And the same thing can happen in other areas of our lives, like when we're making purchasing decisions or evaluating options. So how do we combat these biases? Awareness is key. Just knowing that these biases exist and understanding how they work can help us catch ourselves when we're falling into those traps. And then for something like confirmation bias, actively seeking out opposing viewpoints can be really helpful.
Right, like making a conscious effort to expose yourself to different perspectives, even if they make you uncomfortable. And for anchoring, maybe doing some research beforehand so you have a more realistic idea of what to expect.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about how our brains work and some of the pitfalls we need to watch out for.
Yeah.
Now let's get into some practical strategies that we can actually use to make smarter decisions.
Yes, give us the tools.
Okay, so one really interesting strategy that I came across is the 10-10-10 rule. Have you heard of this one?
I have not. Tell me more.
It was developed by Susie Welch, and it's a really simple but powerful way to inject some long-term thinking into our decision-making.
I like that.
So whenever you're facing a tough choice, you ask yourself 3 questions. How will I feel about this decision in 10 minutes? How will I feel about it in 10 months? And how will I feel about it in 10 years?
I love that. It forces you to think beyond the immediate gratification or the short-term discomfort you might feel and consider the bigger picture.
Exactly. It helps you weigh the potential long-term consequences against those immediate impulses.
That's huge.
And it can be particularly helpful for those big life decisions that have lasting impacts like career changes or major purchases.
It's all about perspective. I like it. What else do we have?
Another great strategy, and this one's more about prioritizing, is the Eisenhower Matrix.
Okay, the Eisenhower Matrix. Tell me about this one.
So this is a really simple tool that helps you categorize your tasks based on urgency and importance. You basically create a 4-quadrant matrix, and you place your tasks into one of the quadrants. Important and urgent, do it now. Important but not urgent, schedule it for later. Not important but urgent, delegate it if you can.
Yeah.
And finally, not important and not urgent, eliminate it.
Oh, I love that. It's like a visual way to get your priorities straight and make sure you're focusing on the right things, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed and everything seems urgent.
Precisely. And what the sources suggest is actually creating a daily task list, using this matrix and reviewing it regularly. It helps you stay on track and avoid getting bogged down by the stuff that's not really moving the needle.
So we've got strategies for thinking long term and for prioritizing our tasks. But what about those times when we feel stuck? Like we just can't seem to find a solution to a problem. The sources mention this idea of reframing. What's that all about?
Reframing is a powerful technique. It's about shifting your perspective. Instead of getting hung up on the problem itself, you try to look at it from a different angle.
Okay, so give us an example of how this works.
Sure, let's say you're feeling stuck in your career. Instead of asking yourself, why am I stuck? You could reframe that question as, what skills can I develop to open up new opportunities? Or what kind of work would truly light me up?
That's such a good point. By changing the way we frame the question, we open ourselves up to new possibilities and solutions that we might not have considered before.
Exactly. And it also helps shift our mindset from one of feeling trapped to one of feeling empowered.
I love that. Okay, what about those times when you're just mentally exhausted and making any decision, even a small one, feels impossible? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. That's what's called decision fatigue.
Decision fatigue. I've definitely experienced that. It's like your brain just hits a wall and you can't even decide what to eat for dinner.
Right. And what the research shows is that our brains have a limited amount of decision-making power. And as we make more and more decisions throughout the day, that power gets depleted. And then we start making poorer choices, we become more impulsive, and we're more likely to just go with the easiest option, even if it's not the best one for us.
So basically, all those little decisions we make throughout the day, they add up and can affect our ability to make good decisions later on.
Precisely. So what can we do about it? Well, one strategy is to try to limit the number of minor decisions we have to make each day, like planning our meals for the week, laying out our clothes the night before, or creating routines for certain tasks.
It's all about simplifying and automating as much as we can to free up that mental energy for the bigger decisions.
Exactly. And another tip is to try to tackle our most important decisions early in the day when our minds are fresh,
That's a good tip.
before that decision fatigue sets in.
Mm.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory, we've talked about strategies. Now let's get into some real-world applications of all of this. The sources give some great examples of how these cognitive biases and decision-making principles can play out in our lives, starting with financial decisions.
Yes, let's talk money.
Okay, so one of the classic biases that can really mess with our finances is the sunk cost fallacy. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh, I think we've all been there at some point. It's like when you keep investing time, money, or energy into something, even though it's clearly not working out, just because you've already poured much into it.
Precisely. And one of the sources uses a great example of staying in a failing project at work. You've already invested so much time and effort that you feel like you have to see it through, even though it's not going anywhere.
Oh, or like staying in a relationship that's clearly run its course, but you don't want to waste all the time you've already invested.
Yes, another classic example. So how do we avoid falling into this trap? Well, the key is to focus on the future, not the past.
So instead of dwelling on what you've already lost, focus on what you can gain by making a change.
Exactly. Ask yourself, is this investment still serving me? Or am I better off cutting my losses and moving on?
That's a great question to ask yourself. It helps shift your perspective from what you've already lost to what you could potentially gain.
Exactly. And speaking of careers, another common bias that can hold us back in our professional lives is the status quo bias.
Status quo bias.
This is our tendency to prefer things to stay the same, even if change might be better for us. It's like that comfort zone that we get stuck in, even if it's not really fulfilling us.
Oh, yeah, that's so relatable. It can be scary to think about making a career change, especially if you've been in the same job for a long time. So how do we overcome this bias?
Well, the first step is recognizing it. And then the sources suggest actively challenging yourself to step outside of your comfort zone.
Like maybe exploring different career paths, taking on new challenges at work, or even just talking to people in different fields to get a sense of what else is out there?
Exactly. And sometimes even small steps can make a big difference, like taking a course in a new subject, attending industry events, or connecting with people on LinkedIn who are doing work that you find interesting.
Makes sense. It's all about taking action and not letting fear hold you back.
Exactly. And finally, in the realm of personal development, there's this thing called the commitment bias.
Okay, commitment bias. What is that?
This is our tendency to stick to a previous decision or commitment, even when it's no longer serving us, often because we want to appear consistent or we don't want to admit that we made a mistake.
Oh, I know that one. It's like when you continue with a hobby or a project that you're no longer passionate about just because you've already told everyone that you're doing it.
Exactly. Or you stay in a relationship that's no longer working because you're afraid of what people will think if you break up.
So true.
So the advice here is to periodically evaluate our goals and commitments and be willing to adjust course if necessary.
And to give ourselves permission to change our minds without feeling like we failed or let anyone down.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, but I think the key takeaway here is that becoming a better decision maker isn't about becoming some kind of superhuman who never makes a mistake. It's about developing self-awareness, understanding how our brains work, and learning to use these strategies and tools to our advantage.
It's about making more conscious, intentional choices rather than just reacting to whatever comes our way.
Exactly. It's about taking control of our decision-making process so that we can create the lives we want.
I love that. And the sources also emphasize the importance of practice. Like, the more we apply these principles in our daily lives, the better we'll get at making those smart choices.
And they suggest developing a decision-making framework, like having a structured process that we can follow whenever we're faced with a tough choice.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Having a step-by-step process can really help us avoid making impulsive decisions that we might regret later.
Exactly. And the sources offer a really simple one. Define the problem, gather information, consider your options, weigh the pros and cons, and then make a choice. It sounds basic, but having that framework can make a huge difference.
So the bottom line is making smarter choices is a skill that we can all develop. It takes effort, it takes practice, but it's definitely worth it.
It definitely is.
Wow, that was a lot of information, but so helpful. It's like a whole new way of thinking about decisions. So as you go about your day, try to apply some of these concepts to the choices you're facing. Maybe try the 1-Rate-10-10 rule or the Eisenhower Matrix and see if it helps you make those smarter choices, the ones that'll lead you to a happier, more fulfilling life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time.
So yeah.